As I am surely avoiding cleaning, figured I'd do a little light reading. So, from a book that's available online, Peter's Rock in Mohammed's Flood, from St. Gregory the Great to St. Leo III, being the seventh volume of the Formation of Christendom, by Thomas W. Allies, KCSG. London, Burns and Oates, LD. New York, Catholic Publication Society Co., 1890. Prologue to the 7 volumes of the Formation of Christendom. This work, being from the beginning one an idea, I place here together the titles of 56 chapters composing it, for each of these was intended to be complete in itself, so far as its special subject reached, but each was likewise to form a distinct link in a chain. The Church of God comes before the thoughtful mind as the vast mass of a kingdom. Its greatest deeds are but parts of something immeasurably greater. The most striking evidence of its doctrines and of its works is cumulative. Those who do not wish to let it so come before them often confine their interests in very narrow bounds of time and space. Thus I have known one who thought himself a bishop, accept Wycliffe as the answer of a child to his question, who first preached the gospel in England. And not only this, they also seize upon a particular incident or person, so invest with extraordinary importance facts which they suppose, and which so conceived are convenient for their purpose, but in historical truth are anything but undisputed. In this tone of mind or shortness of vision, that which is gigantic becomes puny, that which is unending becomes transient. The sequel and coherence of nations, the mighty roll of the ages spoken of by St. Augustine, are lost sight of. Again, in English-speaking countries alone, more than 200 sects call themselves Christian. Their enjoyment of perfect civil freedom and equality veils to them the horror of doctrinal anarchy, in virtue of which alone they exist. By this anarchy, the very conception of unity as the corollary of truth is lost to the popular mind. But through the 8 centuries of which I have treated, the loss of unity was the one conclusive test of falsehood, and the Christian faith stood out to its possessors with the fixed solidity of a mountain range whose summit pierced the heaven. It has been my purpose to exhibit the profound unity of the Christian faith together with the infinite variety of its effects on individual character, on human society, on the action of nations towards each other, on universal as well as national legislation. Like the figure of the great Mother of God bearing her divine Son in her arms, and so including the Incarnation in all its works, the faith stands before us in history. Veste deoriata circumdata verietate. And as the personal unity appears in the symbol of divine love to man expressed in her maternity, so it appears also in the figure of the Church through the ages in which that divine love executes his work. A divided creed means a marred gospel in an incredulous world. I offer this work as a single stone, though costing the labor of 30 years, if perchance it may be accepted in the structure of that cathedral of human thought and action wherein our crucified God is the central figure, around which all has grown. Be allowed to me to quote here words of the present Sovereign Pontiff addressed on the 18th August, 1883, to the Cardinals de Luca, Pietra, and Herrigenrother. It is the voice of all history that God, with the most careful providence, directs the various and never-ending movements of human affairs. Even against man's intention, he makes them serve the advancement of his church. History says further that the Roman pontificate has ever escaped victorious from its contests and the violence employed against it, while its assaulters have failed in the hope which they cherished and have wrought their own destruction. Not less openly does history attest the divine provision made concerning the city of Rome from its very beginning. This was to give forever a home and seat to the successors of St. Peter, from which, as a center, being free from all control of a superior, they might guide the whole Christian commonwealth. And no one has ventured to resist the counsel of the divine providence without sooner or later perceiving the vanity of his efforts. It cannot be expedient, nor is it wise counsel, to fight with the power for whose perpetuity God has pledged himself, while history attests the performance of the pledge. Since Catholics throughout the whole world pay it religious veneration, it is their interest to defend it with all their power. Nay, even the rulers of secular governments must acknowledge this and lay it to heart, especially in times so dangerous, when the very foundations on which human society rests appear well nigh to shake and totter. Contents to the 7 volumes of the Formation of Christendom. Volume 1. Inaugural Lecture on the Philosophy of History, 1854. The Christian Faith and the Individual. Chapter 1. Consummation of the Old World. Chapter 2. The Creation of Individual Man. Chapter 3. Heathen and Christian Man Compared. Chapter 4. Effect of the Christian People on the World. Chapter 5. New Creation of the Primary Relation between Man and Woman. Chapter 6. The Creation of the Virginal Life. Volume 2, The Christian Faith and Society. Chapter 7, The Gods of the Nations When Christ Appeared. Chapter 8, The First and the Second Man. Chapter 9, The Second Man Verified in History. Chapter 10, The First Age of the Martyr Church. Chapter 11, The Second Age of the Martyr Church. Chapter 12, The Third Age of the Martyr Church. Chapter 13, The Christian Church and the Greek Philosophy. 1. Chapter 14, The Christian Church and the Greek Philosophy. 2. Volume 3, The Christian Faith and Philosophy. Chapter 15, The Foundation of the Roman Church, the type and form of every particular church, its contrast with philosophy, and its development with the Judaic embryo. Chapter 16, Neo-Stoicism and the Christian Church. Chapter 17, The First Resurrection of Cultured Heathenism in the Neo-Pythagorean School. Chapter 18, Standing Ground of Philosophy from the Ascension of Nerva to that of Severus. Chapter 19, The Gospel of Philosophic Heathenism. Chapter 20, The Neoplatonic Philosophy and Epoch. Chapter 21, The Respective Power of the Greek Philosophy and the Christian Church to Construct the Society. Chapter 22, The Church Reconstructing the Natural Order by the Supernatural. Volume 4, Church and State in the Formation of Christendom. Chapter 23, Prologue, The Kingdom as Prophesied and as Fulfilled. Chapter 24, Relation between the civil and the spiritual powers from Adam to Christ. Chapter 25, Relation between the spiritual and civil powers after Christ. Chapter 26, Transmission of spiritual authority from the person of our Lord to Peter and the apostles as set forth in the New Testament. Chapter 27, Transmission of spiritual authority as witnessed in the history of the Church from AD 29 to AD 325. Chapter 28, The one episcopate resting upon the one sacrifice. Chapter 29. Independence of the Ante-Nicene Church shown in her organic growth. Chapter 30. Independence of the Ante-Nicene Church shown in her mode of positive teaching and in her mode of resisting error. Chapter 31. The Church's battle for independence over against the Roman Empire. Volume 5. The throne of the fisherman built by the carpenter's son. The root, the bond, and the crown of Christendom. Chapter 32. The witness of 18 centuries to the See of Peter. Chapter 33. From St. Peter to St. Sylvester, number 1. Chapter 34. From St. Peter to St. Sylvester, number 2. Chapter 35. Constantine and the Church. Chapter 36. Constantine and his sons, Julian, Valentinian, Valens. Chapter 37. From Constantine at Nicaea to Theodosius at Constantinople. Chapter 38. Church and State under the Theodosian House. Chapter 39. Church and State from the Primacy from 380 to 440. Chapter XL. I'm reading these numbers, they're Roman numerals. Are we doing this right? Is L 30? Well, in sequential order, chapter 40. The flowering of the patristic literature, number 1. Chapter 41. I'm going to switch to reading the letters. Chapter XLI. The flowering of patristic literature, number 2. Chapter XLII. Saint Leo the Great. Volume BI. Volume 6. The Holy See and the Wandering of the Nations, Leo I to Gregory I. Chapter 43. XLIII. The Holy See and the Wandering of the Nations. Chapter XLIV. Ex-Live. Kaiser fell down. Chapter XLV. Peter stood up. Chapter XLVI. Justinian. Chapter XLVII. Are we at 47? St. Gregory the Great. Volume 7. BII. Peter's Rock in Mohammed's Flood. Oh, that's where we are. Chapter XLVIII. 48. The Pope and the Byzantine. Preface. This volume is strictly in continuance of the two which it follows. The throne of the fisherman built by the carpenter's son, and the Holy See and the wandering of nations. It is bulk alone which prevents my offering the 3-in-1 cover as historic proof from original documents of the first 8 centuries of that Holy See, that the Holy See, by the institution of Christ, is the root, the bond, and the crown of Christendom. The works chiefly used in it are, before and above all, the letters of the popes in their office of governing the Christian commonwealth, which are contained in the great collection of Manzi, 31 volumes folio. The full titles of other works chiefly referred to are Cardinal Hegenrother, to whose work Photius, Patriarch von Constantinople, Sein Leben, Sein Schriften, und das Grettische Schisma, into his Handbuch der Allgemeinen Kirchengeschichte. I owe great obligations. They are each in 3 volumes. Alfred von Rumant, Geschichte der Stadt Rom, in 3 volumes. Gregorius, Geschichte der Stadt Rom, in 8 volumes. Kurth, Les Origines de la Civilisation Moderne, in 2 volumes. Jungmann, Dissertations, in 7 volumes. The German edition of Rohrbacher's History, Volume X by Rump, Volume XI by Kellner, Hafelde, Concilian Geschichte, in 7 volumes. Moderatori Annali d'Italia, Brunengo, Le Origini delle Sovranità Temporale dei Papi, and I prime pape re le utomo rede Longobarde, F. von Honsbrock, Entstehung und Entwicklung des Kirchenstaates, Nehus, Kaisertum und Papsttum, Dollinger, Mohammeds Religion nach ihrer inneren Entwicklung und ihrem Einflüsse auf das Leben der Völker. Regensburg, 1838. Oh boy, you can only see those letters. You can only see the words. I'm going to switch to chapter 4, since this is just a sample. Chapter 4, Christendom and Islam. We are now come to the greatest of contrasts and oppositions in human history, to the Church of Christ, the foundress of nations, and to Islam, her counterfeit and opponent, to the law which went forth from Jerusalem and struck its perpetual root in Rome, and to the force which went forth from Mecca, tarried for a while in Damascus and Baghdad, and then encamped in the city of Constantine. 2 reigns which never have ceased and never can cease to counterwork each other, the reign of the word and the reign of the sword. In the 28 years which run from AD 632 to 661, of the 4 caliphs, Abu Bakr, Omar, Osman, and Ali, the sword has severed from the throne of Constantine its fairest provinces, and conquered besides the territory, the whole mass of which exceeded the Roman Empire at its greatest extension. The sword of Mohammed's successors in doing this has inflicted deadly wounds on the Christian patriarchates and dioceses subjected to the new dominion. It has also reduced the unsubdued portion of the Eastern Empire to tremble for its future existence. It has made the whole West, already in possession of the Teuton family of races, gather itself together and prepare for a death struggle with the advancing enemy. It is necessary to consider in his personal life the man who gives his name to this immense movement, who raised the banner which flouted the cross and wrote upon that banner the symbol of human enjoyment against that of divine abasement. The facts of his life which I wish to note are especially those which are reproduced in his religion. They pass beyond the sphere of the individual because they reappear incessantly in the history of 1250 years and affect nations of the south and east which dwell from the Atlantic Ocean to the extremities of China. Mohammed was born in April 571 in the city of Mecca, of a family possessing spiritual rank in that home of ancient pilgrimages for the Arabian tribes. But the branch to which he belonged was poor. His father, Abdallah, died about the time of his birth. His mother, Amina, born in Medina, was so poor that she could scarcely support a nurse for him. His mother died when he was 6 years old. His grandfather then took care of him, but died also after 2 years. From that time his uncle, Abu Talib, provided for him, but was so poor likewise that the orphan child was presently reduced to tend sheep, whereas the rich class at Mecca was largely engaged in traffic with their caravans, which visited Abyssinia, southern Arabia, Syria, Egypt, and Persia. Mohammed is said in his youth to have twice visited Syria, probably as a camel driver, but it is said with greater certainty that at 25 he entered the service of a rich widow, Khadijah, and journeyed for her in South Arabia. He afterwards married her, then for the first time became sufficiently rich to turn the thoughts which slumbered within him to higher subjects than procuring his daily bread. His marriage with Khadijah lasted till he was 50 years of age, when he lost her at the same time his uncle Abu Talib. During the whole period of his marriage with Khadijah, who was much older than himself, he lived in close union with her. What seems to have been, at least in regard to this relationship, a virtuous and religious life. Mohammed's education had been much neglected. His country at the time was in a most uncivilized condition, destitute of science, arts, and letters. Bardship alone was in repute, and for this Mohammed had no gift, though he had a great gift of oratory. The gift of writing was little diffused. It is doubtful whether Mohammed even in his later years possessed it. He was acquainted with Jewish and Christian doctrines only by oral information. The great authority of St. John of Damascus says that he lighted upon the Old and New Testaments by conferences with an Arian monk, and thus drew up his own religion. He was about 40 years of age when he began to carry out a design to restore what he thought the religion of Abraham, and to destroy the idolatry into which his countrymen had fallen. He met with small success and much opposition in this attempt until the 11th year of the mission, which he claimed as prophet, the 51st of his life. A most marked change in his personal conduct and in the conditions of his life took place. The chief men at Mecca had generally refused to receive him as a prophet and to accept the reformation of religion which he proposed to them. In his first years he had confined his revelations to his nearest relations and friends. He had gained Abu Bakr and his young cousin Ali, and uncle Hamza, named for his valor, the Lion of God, and above all, Omar, at first his opponent, but when converted with the most energetic character among all the companions of the Prophet, and the strongest support of Islam. On the whole, however, things had gone so far against him that he retired secretly, together with Abu Bakr, from Mecca to Medina. This event, termed the Flight, took place in September 622, from which year his followers count their time. It may be taken as indeed the time in which his full character as prophet came forth to light. Henceforth he appeared rather as the preacher of a new religion than as the restorer of what he called the religion of Abraham. The most important principle laid down by him from the time of his migration from Mecca to Medina was that he then first permitted in the name of God war against unbelievers. He afterwards made this a holy duty. It was considered the first of virtues to fight the enemies of Islam. To those who fell in such a battle, he promised the highest joys of paradise. To those who rejected him, he threatened a shameful death by the disposition of God. Upon his first settlement in Medina, which afterwards changed its original name of Jathrib into this new name, signifying the city, he built a mosque and arranged worship, in which a short prayer was offered 5 times a day. He sought at first to gain over the Jews residing there, and marked Jerusalem as the Qibla, that is, the point to which the face should be turned in prayer, on the 10th day of the first month as a fast day, and allowed Jewish converts to keep the Sabbath. But when he found that the Jews would receive a Messiah only of the race of David, he became their bitterest enemy. Later he appointed Mecca instead of Jerusalem as the Qibla, the month Ramadan as fasting time, and Friday as the day of rest. His first campaigns, when he could scarcely bring a few hundred men into the field, for the inhabitants of Medina had not yet joined him, but had only granted him protection, were but predatory attacks on the caravans of Mecca, which came near Medina. But when the Meccans grew prudent and either defended their caravans with a strong escort or sent them around by bypass to Syria, Muhammad planned a plundering attack in one of the holy months, when every Arab deemed himself secure. This is the beginning of a number of actions which, though he was not endued with a delicate moral sense, he must have known to be bad, and only ordered or at least approved for the sake of the end aimed at, a chastisement of the heathen, and breaking in upon their commerce. What Muhammad did was to call his follower Abdallah to give him a sealed packet and instruct him to go to South Arabia with 12 companions. He was not to open the packet before the third day, and then fulfill the order it contained. Abdallah obeyed, broke the seal on the third day, and found only the words, "Go with thy companions to the valley of Nakhla, southeast of Mecca, and there wait for the caravans of Mecca." Words which Abdallah interpreted to mean that he should fall upon these caravans. This he accomplished without difficulty. 2 men were taken prisoners, 1 killed, and the whole lading carried as plunder to Medina. Muhammad had plainly used this short and sealed packet to cut off all explanation with Abdallah respecting an act of rapine in the sacred months, so as to be able to put away the responsibility from himself as he might be needed. Even the Muslim at Medina had but one cry of reprobation over this desecration of the sacred months. Muhammad at first disavowed Abdallah as having gone beyond his command, for he had not told him to attack the caravans in the sacred months. But when he found himself considered no less the author of this deed, and he did not mean for the future to secure to Mecca 4 tranquil months for its commerce, Quran verses were published in which war against unbelievers was excused at every time, because they committed the much greater sin of driving the Prophet out of his country. The attempt to exculpate Muhammad from the guilt of the blood murderously shed in falling upon this caravan is made the more difficult because his biographers speak of many other murders ordered by him, even in the case of women, and extol him for such things. It may be noted that in the last time before his flight, he was no longer true and sincere. Thus he recorded the whole history of the Old and New Testament prophets, adorned with many Jewish and Christian legends, which he maintained, as was his wont, to have been revealed to him by the angel Gabriel. This did not impose upon the inhabitants of Mecca, who were right in ascribing his knowledge of these things to intercourse with foreign informants less illiterate than himself. The proper fight between Muhammad and the Meccans took place in the 2nd year of the Hijra at Badr, a station between Medina and Mecca. Muhammad had gone out with somewhat more than 300 men to surprise and plunder certain rich caravans on their return from Syria. Abu Sufyan, the head of the Umayyad line, led these caravans and had notice of Muhammad's purpose. He sent an express to Mecca inviting his townsmen to dispatch an armed escort to defend their property. Before these 900 strong arrived, Abu Sufyan, knowing that Muhammad lay in wait for him at Badr, succeeded in passing around this place by directing his caravan in security along the coast road. When news that their goods were safe reached the Meccan camp, a portion of the escort, which had taken arms only through fear of losing their property, wished to return. The rest, bitter enemies of Muhammad, and also fighting men, preferred to advance upon Badr. This was resolved upon, but many in the force persisted in returning to Mecca. The same hesitation prevailed in the Prophet's camp, which had come out intending to plunder, not for the fight with an enemy still continuing to be in number, but yet greater was the fear of showing cowardice, and so striking the new faith with the hardest blow. So they came to a bloody conflict, in which the disciplined Medinis prevailed over the Meccans, whom their commercial habits had partly enfeebled. They carried off rich plunder. Muhammad did not himself fight. He was praying in a hut until he sank exhausted, and when he recovered consciousness, announced a victory to his friends, obtained by the aid of celestial warriors. This first deed of arms laid the basis for a rapid increase in Mohammedanism. It gave the poor community spoil in arms, in horses, and in camels, and no little ransom for the prisoners taken. It strengthened their confidence, increased their following, and encouraged them to further enterprise. The Jewish tribe Kenuka was their first prey. It was compelled to unconditional surrender and would probably have been entirely massacred if a free retreat had not been obtained for it by Abd Allah, the head of an Arabian clan dwelling in Medina. with whom these Jews had been in former alliance, but all their goods went to the Moslem. At this time occurred many slayings of particularly hated or dangerous enemies of Islam. So Muhammad inflicted a great terror which reduced to silence individual opponents and carried waverers into the bosom of Islam, which promised them security. But in the meantime, the Meccans were not idle. Both interest and honor required them to avenge the defeat of Badr Abu Sufyan of Badr, Ibn Sufyan, in the year 625. The third of the Hijra appeared at the head of 3,000 men and occupied a camp to the east of Medina. Muhammad wished to confine himself to the defense of the city, but his more fanatic followers denounced this conduct as cowardice, and he was compelled to march out with about 1,000 men, of whom nearly a third were commanded by Abd Allah. This man, a secret enemy of Muhammad, returned back to the city. The Muslim, however, in spite of their small number, fought with effect at Mount Uhud, north of Medina, until the bowmen, who were ranged against the enemy's horsemen, deserted their post, and the impetuous Khalid fell upon their retreat. A panic seized the believers, so that they sought safety in flight. Muhammad himself was wounded and sank to the ground, so that a report of his death was spread, which added to the discomfiture of his host. But a faithful henchman recognized him by the eyes alone, in spite of a mailcoat, helmet, and visor, and brought him to safety, while the Meccans, believing his death, cared not to pursue the other fugitives and were retiring. Only after the battle was ended, Abu Sufyan learnt that he was still alive. Muhammad, the day after the battle, in which he lost 70 men, pursued the enemy for some distance, only to show that he was not discouraged. The defeat at Uhud lessened Muhammad's reputation as much as the victory at Badr had raised it. The only considerable gain which Muhammad, in the 4th year of the Hijra, could offer to his believers to make up for the losses suffered was the expulsion of the Jews of the clan Nadir, who had lands and many strong castles near Medina. They surrendered these, and as there had been no battle, Muhammad confiscated their property and bestowed it on his party of fugitives from Mecca. At the end of this year, he appeared near Badr with a larger force, to show that he was not afraid to defy Abu Sufyan, who had threatened a fresh attack after the battle at Uhud. But the Meccans were not ready, and moreover, would not fight on a bad year. Towards the end of the 5th year, in 627, they appeared again under Abu Sufyan, about 10,000 strong, with their allies, out of various Bedouin clans before Medina. The Medinese could hardly set 3,000 men against them, and were, in general, downhearted, fearing an attack besides from the Jewish clan Qurayza. This time, Muhammad maintained his plan not to meet the enemy in the open field, but only to defend the town. By the advice of a Persian, he drew a broad trench about it. Slight as this defense was, it sufficed, in the Arab ignorance of the art of siege, to keep the enemy from attacking in force. Bad weather ensued, and Muhammad succeeded in sowing distrust of each other among the Confederates, so that they retired after doing nothing. But though the siege of Medina had cost Muhammad little material loss, his reputation as warrior and as prophet had suffered greatly. As at Uhud, instead of following the Arabian custom to offer battle, he had cowered behind walls and trenches. Again, he turned first against the Jews, who had entered into negotiations with the Meccans. After a few weeks, he compelled them to surrender. These were of the clan Qurayza, formerly Confederates, with the second large Arabian clan domiciled in Medina. They hoped, through the mediation of this clan, to get as good conditions as the clan Kenuka had obtained through Abd Allah. But the head of this clan had been wounded during the siege of the city, and when Muhammad appeared to his judgment, he condemned to death the men whose number ran from 600 to 900, and their wives and children to slavery. Muhammad had this hard sentence executed immediately in the marketplace of Medina. This expedition was followed by others against hostile Bedouin clans. Thus, the bad impression left by the siege was gradually effaced. So at the end of the 6th year of the Hijra, 628, Muhammad was able to resolve, at the head of his friends, as well as believers as heathen Arabs in alliance with him, on a pilgrimage to Mecca. He issued a solemn invitation to join this pilgrimage. It met with small acceptance. He had issued it in the name of God, and so was obliged to carry it out, though it was attended by an inconsiderable number, as to which the counts may vary, between 700 and 1,400 men. He had to trust to the Arab reluctance to shed blood in the sacred months, though he had himself violated one sacred month by murder and robbery. Finding the Meccans resolute to forbid him entrance into their city, he had to halt on the border of the holy territory. After a long treaty, agreement was made that he should retire for that year, but should be allowed in the following year to pass 3 days in Mecca on pilgrimage. The Meccans, for the sake of their commerce, were as anxious for peace as Mohammed, and so a truce for 10 years was struck, which yet had this favorable condition for them, that while their fugitives were to be given up, those of Mohammed might be secure in Mecca. This repulse of the Prophet and his companions from the holy city and its temple was deeply felt, yet there were advantages obtained by the seemingly dishonoring truce. Mohammed appeared at least to be recognized by the proud city as an equal power. Now he might send out his missionaries into every part of Arabia, make proselytes, and conclude alliances, and the right to enter Mecca the next year with those who believed in him was something gained which perceptibly advanced his claim through the Arabians. To increase his strength, enrich his followers, and so enlarge their numbers, and efface by the new victory the bad impression which the failure of the pilgrimage had caused, he attacked the Jews of Cheber, who had lands and several castles 4 or 5 days' journey northeast of Medina. These were successfully stormed and sacked. All that the rest could do was to surrender to the conqueror on condition that they should serve him for the future as tenants who should give him half the produce of the land. So by the conquest of other Jews, he was able to increase the number of his troops. In the year 628 to 629, which passed between the failure of the pilgrimage to Mecca and the subsequent pilgrimage carried out according to the treaty, several attacks on the Bedouins took place. The number of his believers and allies increased, and the thought was more and more developed in Mohammed that Islam must by degrees be accepted as the only true religion, not only by all Arabians, but by all the nations of the earth. Even before he obtained possession of Mecca, he sent messengers to the neighboring princes of Persia, Byzantium, Abyssinia, as well as to the Christian governor of Egypt, and to several Arabian chiefs subject to Byzantine or Persian sovereignty, inviting them to be converted to his faith. These embassies had no result, and were rejected with more or less harshness. Only the Greek governor of Egypt gave them friendly reception without being converted to Islam, sent the Prophet costly presents, among them 2 slave women, of whom one, Miriam, so greatly charmed Mohammed that for her company he neglected his wives. For the man who had been faithful to his old wife Khadijah until her death, when he was past 50 years of age, had from the time that he came forward not merely as the restorer of a primitive religion which had suffered corruptions, but as the herald of a new religion, say from the date of the Hegira itself, espoused about a dozen wives, some for love and some for policy, to make alliances with families of repute. Among these was Aishka, daughter of Abu Bakr, whom he took when scarcely out of her childhood, a daughter of Omar, and a sister of Abd Allah, who had been disgraced by the violation of a sacred month. The Quran limits the number of lawful wives to 4, but Muhammad himself was to be an exception. At the time, polygamy in Arabia had no restriction, and as public opinion was not shocked, his wives had to submit. But when Miriam, the Abyssinian slave, assumed the position of a dangerous rival, they complained to their families and showed their contempt to the faithless husband. He promised to quit the favored slave, but he dwelt with her for a month apart from his wives, and then produced verses of the Quran dispensing him for his promise, respecting Miriam, and threatening his wives that if they continued in their disobedience, he would take instead of them more submissive wives and virgins. But a more important incident in the domestic life of Muhammad was to occur, which showed how entirely he was led away by sensual passion. He had fallen in love with Zineb, the wife of Zayd, formerly his slave, then his adopted son, and one of the most attached among his followers. Zayd perceived this and was willing to cede her to the man who was not only his prophet but his benefactor. The prophet took her and added her to the number of his wives. But the Arabians, though they practiced unlimited polygamy, did not allow to marry the wife of an adopted son, whom they considered in the light of a real son. Muhammad felt the scandal and produced a passage from the Quran. In it he declared in the name of God and produced a passage from the Quran. In it he declared in the name of God the custom hitherto entertained of treating adopted children as really children to be foolish, and for the future even sinful. Then he spread the belief that Zayd's divorce from his wife had taken place against his own advice. He makes God remind him in a following verse not how, notwithstanding his own love for her, he had counseled Zayd to keep her, and how even after divorce he had shrunk, through fear of men, from espousing her until God had expressly commanded it. And this for two reasons. First, to show that he who acts after the will of God should he not heed the tattle of men. And secondly, to give by his own example the more force to the newly enacted law in regard of adopted sons. A law, he added, which earlier prophets, whom he takes care not to name, had promulgated. Oh, I'm not even halfway done in this chapter. Not even halfway done. I'm going to go up the beginning of it. There are other books online that have, well, the biographers. Let's see how the writing is at the beginning of this chapter. Chapter 1. The Pope and the Byzantine. Well, as I read this account of the brief chapter on the account of the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there is a striking similarity as I'm trying not to. Oh, I don't know when you read or hear a story, like the events in your mind. It's almost this great era of time. It's almost in a comical nature. There's a book that I was reading online called Mormonism Unveiled, or the life and confessions of the late Bishop John D. Lee. And in it, he has many accounts of a similar nature involving, well, young Joseph, and then Brigham, and accounts of polygamy. The battles the Mormons and the Gentiles would have, the expulsions, the Danites and their furniture, is a very interesting read. So this volume was a scholar's, well, appears to be a life work, or at least 30 years of work, going through the historical archives, and what did they say at Manzi? Just wherever the Vatican stores these documents. The Race of David. This is only one source, and where this source's accounts came from. Very interesting. How long have we been transmitting? Oh, wow. It's almost drinking time. It's almost drinking time. I think that's one of the great tragedy comedies is the way we take things out here in the society that I grew up in. I don't think we could turn that into a life of Brian. Always look on the bright side of life. Doo 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 doo. Always look on the bright side. Yeah, I don't know if we could get away with it, boys. Wait, we're all boys. Ellen? All right. Well, I guess when we're all dirty and smelly and and gross. Do you like the reading streams? I actually become kind of agitated. Should be cleaning. Oh. In the year 616, the Persians broke into Egypt and took and plundered Alexandria and carried their ravages to the borders of Ethiopia. Another Persian army besieged Chalcedon. Still, Heraclius remained inactive. He only sent an embassy to Chosroes in 619. He sent another, beseeching mercy in the name of the Senate. Chosroes replied, I will spare the Romans when they renounce their crucified one and worship the Son. He remembered not that he had to thank the Romans for his crown, that in this time of trouble he had found help only from God of the Christians. Heraclius lost courage at this answer. Since the loss of Egypt, Constantinople was suffering from famine, as well as a grievous pestilence. The emperor resolved to quit his capital and take refuge with his father in Africa. He embarked his chief treasures and directed the fleet to Carthage. Most of it was wrecked in a storm. A panic fell on his people, and they besought him with tears and cries not to forsake them. The patriarch Sergius went to the palace, led Heraclius to Sancta Sophia, and compelled him before the altar to swear aloud not to desert his capital. Heraclius submitted against his will. Oh, what a fun history course this would be. Oh, I have a poor stream quality anyway. There are probably people freaking out. Oh, wow. I only have 4.5% drop frames, but my kilobyte